Caroline walked into the hospital like anyone else. No makeup, no entourage, no title. Just a tired woman seeking help. What she found inside would shake her to her core. Patients ignored, children crying, veterans clutching their chests while staff scrolled through phones. But the doctor who humiliated them all had no idea the woman sitting quietly in the corner owned the building he ruled like a tyrant. And in less than 24 hours, he'd learned that justice walks softly, but hits like thunder. And without making you wait too long, I'll start the story right now. The emergency room at Westbridge Memorial Hospital buzzed with fluorescent lights and cold efficiency. Its corridors were designed to be sterile, but tonight, they felt almost inhuman. Karoline Leavitt sat quietly in the corner. No entourage, no fanfare. Just a simple dark coat, jeans, and a tired look in her eyes. She wasn't here as the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history. She wasn't even here as a public figure. Tonight she was a patient, or so it seemed. The woman behind the reception desk didn't lift her head. She spoke through gum and indifference. Name? Caroline, she replied simply. The receptionist scanned her from head to toe. Faded coat, flat shoes, no visible jewelry. She didn't recognize her, and that was the plan. Insurance? I'll pay in cash. A sigh, a scoff, and then a paper number handed out like a grocery deli ticket. Take a seat. Could be a while. Caroline took her place in the waiting room. Around her were stories, painful ones. An elderly man clutched his chest. A single mother rocked her feverish child. A teenage boy held a towel over a bloodied wrist. But none of them were priority. They were poor. They were inconvenient. They were invisible. And Caroline, well, she was watching, listening, and remembering every word. Because this wasn't just a visit, it was an investigation. She'd received complaints, anonymous letters, emails from former staff, rumors of mistreatment, arrogance, neglect. It didn't add up, because this hospital, she owned it. But no one here knew that. And tonight, they'd show her everything. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and in strode Dr. Conrad Whitmore, 6 feet of designer arrogance wrapped in a spotless white coat. His watch was worth more than most of the patients in that room had seen in a year. His polished loafers clicked across the tile like a gavel hitting a bench. "Morning, staff," he barked. No eye contact, no warmth, not a single glance toward the waiting room where a mother quietly cried into her baby's hair, or where a veteran in a worn military jacket sat grimacing with every breath. To Whitmore, patients weren't people. They were problems to be dismissed, numbers to be shuffled. The receptionist perked up instantly. "Dr. Whitmore, you have a private consultation waiting. Room 3. He gave a half smirk. "Let's get the donors in before the deadbeats." Caroline's eyes followed him like a hawk. And then it began. A nurse approached, nervous. "Doctor, we have a child running a high fever. Room 1, single mother, no insurance." Whitmore barely slowed. "Then tell her to go to County General. This isn't a charity." "But sir." "No buts. This isn't a daycare either." Caroline's jaw clenched. She looked back at the mother, whose face was pale with fear. Caroline stood up, quietly, calmly. She approached the nurse, her voice just above a whisper. "If that baby crashes and no one helps, who will answer for that?" The nurse glanced at her, unsure who she was. But something in Caroline's voice, something calm, fierce, authoritative, froze her in place. I can't go against Dr. Whitmore." Caroline placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You already know what the right thing is. The question is, what will it cost to stay silent?" And then, another flashpoint. A man in his 70s staggered forward from the waiting bench. "Chest pain," he gasped. I need..." Whitmore passed him with a side glance. Call a cab if it's that urgent. He kept walking. Karoline rushed forward, steadying the man. Sir, sit. Breathe. Keep your eyes open. A nurse finally ran to help, but Whitmore, he was already gone. And in that moment, Karoline Leavitt saw everything she needed to see. It wasn't a bad day. This was the system, a system she unknowingly helped build and now had to tear down. The emergency room's fluorescent lights continued their relentless hum as if unaware of the injustice unfolding beneath them. Karoline returned to her seat, but she was no longer just observing. Her heart beat like a war drum. The mother's silent tears, the elderly veteran's labored breaths, the terrified boy still holding a blood-soaked towel to his hand. It was no longer about collecting evidence. It was personal now. She watched as the receptionist typed with indifference, scrolling on her phone between patient charts. A nurse leaned against the wall, waiting for Dr. Whitmore's next set of dismissive orders. The waiting room clock ticked forward with the sound of time slipping away, and with it, people's dignity. Karoline couldn't sit quietly anymore. A sharp cry pierced the silence. The baby. The mother clutched her child tighter. The fever had risen. The baby's eyes rolled slightly, his tiny body trembling, lips pale. Please, she cried out again. He's burning up. Still, no one moved. Karoline rose. But this time, not as a witness. She walked briskly to the front desk, her heels echoing with authority. The receptionist looked up, irritated. Yes? Karoline didn't flinch. Page a pediatrician, now. I already told that woman. Karoline didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone turned to steel. If that child crashes and dies in this lobby, it will be on your hands. And believe me when I say, this hospital will answer for it. The room froze. You have 60 seconds, or I will personally walk into every department on this floor until someone listens. The receptionist hesitated, then reached for the phone. Behind Karoline, the mother sobbed with relief. And the veteran? He leaned forward, watching her, eyes filled with something that hadn't been there moments ago. Hope. Just as the call went out over the intercom, the door to exam room 3 swung open. Dr. Whitmore stepped into the hallway, smirking as he tossed a latex glove into the trash. Making house calls, are we? Karoline turned to him, for the first time face to face. You ignored a feverish infant. You dismissed a man clutching his chest. You humiliated a wounded teen, all in the past hour. Whitmore squinted. And you are? She stepped forward slowly. I'm the person who's going to clean this place up. A pause, then his smirk deepened. Oh, so you're one of those activist types. Did TikTok send you? She almost laughed. Number my conscience did. Well, good for you, honey. Now go back to your blog post or whatever it is you do. I actually save lives for a living. Karoline stared at him, deadpan. You save numbers, not lives. A few nurses had begun to gather, quietly watching. Excuse me? He asked, face reddening. You don't practice medicine, she continued. You perform arrogance. You ignore suffering because you assume the poor are a waste of time. Whitmore scoffed, loud enough for the crowd. Let me guess. You think compassion is more important than speed? Than statistics? Than making sure this place doesn't go bankrupt? Karoline stepped closer. What I believe, doctor, is that every human life deserves dignity. No one should be humiliated for being poor, for being scared, for asking for help. You think you can just walk in here and lecture me? He snapped. Now Karoline's voice grew firm, steely, public. I don't just think it, I know it. And now the room was listening. Patients, nurses, orderlies. Even the guards had wandered close. I've been watching you, watching how you run this floor like a king over serfs, choosing who gets compassion based on their clothes, their wallet, their voice. Lady, who do you even think you are? Karoline paused. A beat, then with calm precision. I'm Karoline Leavitt, and I own this hospital. Silence. A full 10 seconds of disbelief. Whitmore's smirk crumbled. His eyes darted to the receptionist, then to the nurses, then back to Karoline. You what? She nodded once, then pulled a badge from her inner coat pocket. The board seal, her signature, her title, founder, Leavitt Wellness Network. Gasps swept the room. A nurse dropped her clipboard. The receptionist looked like she might faint. Whitmore stepped back. You're bluffing. Karoline didn't move. Check the tax records, the grant proposals, the building permits. You've been working for me this whole time and treating my patients like trash. Dr. Whitmore's face flushed beet red. What is this? Some kind of ambush? I've kept this floor profitable by violating everything this place was built to protect. Now Karoline turned to the staff. You know what I'm talking about. You've watched him humiliate patients. You've been told to stay quiet. You've been punished for speaking out. The staff exchanged glances. No one moved until a soft voice. It's true. It was the young nurse who had refused to help the child. I was warned not to file a report, she said. He called me too emotional. Cut my hours the next week. Another voice from the back. He laughed when my shift partner asked for medical supplies, said, we don't waste gauze on junkies. Now they were all speaking, one after another, whispers turning into testimonies. Karoline let the silence build once more, letting the air fill with the sound of courage being born. Then she turned to Whitmore, one last time. You may wear the coat, but you're not a doctor, not anymore. She stepped aside and addressed security. Escort him to the staff exit. Collect his badge. Inform administration. We'll be conducting a full audit immediately. Whitmore's jaw dropped. You can't be serious. I'm deadly serious. Two guards moved forward. He backed away, stunned. As they reached for his arm, he snapped, I'll sue. You'll regret this. Karoline smiled softly. Number. You'll regret everything you didn't do for the people you were supposed to serve. And as the doors closed behind him, the emergency room felt lighter. The lights didn't hum quite as loudly. The air felt warmer, and somewhere in the back, the baby began to breathe easier. For the first time that night, the waiting room didn't feel like a prison. It felt like something was cracking open, like a fog of fear was lifting from the eyes of the people who had grown used to silence. Karoline stood by the front desk, her posture composed but her heart pounding. Not out of fear, but from the gravity of what had just happened, the weight of the truth that had finally been spoken. The humiliation stripped away, the hierarchy collapsed. And yet, her work had only just begun. A nurse approached her cautiously, a clipboard in hand, but her expression had changed. No longer guarded. Now it held something else. Respect. Miss Leavitt, she said softly, the baby's vitals are stabilizing. We got him into room 4. He'll be okay. Karoline let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Thank you. The nurse smiled, really smiled for the first time that evening. Number, thank you. At that moment, a shuffle of footsteps approached from behind. Karoline turned and saw the elderly veteran who'd been clutching his chest earlier. His breathing was more stable now. An oxygen mask had been fitted loosely under his chin, and a nurse supported him at the elbow. I heard everything, he rasped. You saved that baby's life, and probably mine too. Karoline moved to steady him gently. You shouldn't be on your feet. I've been sitting for too long in this life, he replied with a wry smile. It's about time someone stood up. He looked at her closely now, his eyes glassy with emotion. You remind me of my daughter. She used to work in hospice, said dignity was the last thing we could give someone, that when the world takes your health, your money, Your strength, dignity should be the last thing you lose. Caroline's eyes welled slightly, but she didn't look away. She placed her hand on his arm. You haven't lost yours, she whispered, and no one in this hospital will ever be treated like they have. Nearby, the teenage boy with the bloody hand was finally getting stitched up, his eyes flickering toward Caroline, as if trying to understand what had just unfolded. A woman in scrubs knelt beside him. Sorry it took so long, sweetheart. You're brave. I thought... No one saw me, he said. Caroline heard those words, and they hit like thunder. That's what this whole thing was about. People feeling invisible in the very places meant to heal them. She turned back to the room, no longer just a lobby, but a battleground now transitioning into something sacred. Nurses whispered. Orderlies picked up speed. An entire floor was beginning to breathe again. And then, something unexpected. One of the older janitors stepped out of the break room. He was wiry, bent with age, his face lined with decades of quiet labor. He approached Caroline slowly, hat in hand. I know who you are now, he said, voice gravelly. Didn't recognize you in the coat. Caroline smiled. That was the point. I've worked here 30 years, he said. Cleaned floors, emptied bins, seen things people pretend not to see. He swallowed, voice thick with emotion. Never thought I'd live to see someone like you. Actually care. She stepped closer, humbled. What's your name? Elias. Thank you, Elias, for staying, for watching, for speaking now. He nodded slowly, the weight of it all too much for words. He placed his hand over his heart, then turned and walked away with pride in his step. That was the power of truth. It didn't just punish the wicked. It lifted the righteous. By sunrise, Caroline had summoned the hospital board. The administrator, now pale and visibly shaken, sat at the far end of the conference table. He no longer interrupted, no longer smirked. He simply listened. Caroline laid down new terms. An anonymous abuse reporting system, effective immediately. Mandatory retraining of every employee on patient dignity and care standards. Public transparency reports posted weekly. And finally, scholarship programs to hire and train local talent from underserved communities. We will heal from the inside out, she said firmly. Not just bones and bodies, but this culture, this system, this sickness of apathy that allowed people like Whitmore to flourish. A woman on the board, silver-haired, thick-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. You understand this will cost us time, money, maybe even public scrutiny. Caroline nodded. Justice always costs something. Silence. Then applause. Slow from the far corner. Then across the table. Until the entire boardroom filled with the sound of something rare in such places. Conviction. That same afternoon, Caroline addressed the hospital staff. She stood at the main staircase, now crowded with nurses, janitors, administrative assistants, EMTs. I didn't come here to make a scene, she said. I came because I believe this place could be better. She gestured to the floor below, where patients sat more calmly now, where soft music played over the intercom, where no one was crying alone. This hospital was meant to be a sanctuary, not a sorting center for the worthy and unworthy. Then she paused, let the emotion fill her voice just enough. And for every single person who stayed silent out of fear, I understand, but that fear ends now. A single tear rolled down the cheek of a young nurse in the front row. You are now free to care, to speak, to defend the people who come here scared, broken, uncertain. You're free to be healers again. And as she stepped away from the microphone, the staff erupted in something more powerful than cheers. Hope. The days that followed were like spring after a harsh winter. Whispers turned into conversations. Glances turned into greetings. And for the first time in years, Westbridge Memorial Hospital began to feel like what it was always meant to be, a place of healing. The patients noticed first. That veteran who once clutched his chest alone, he was now laughing with his nurse during his follow-up, talking about his grandkids. The mother with the feverish baby, her son had stabilized. She was given a warm room, warm food, and most importantly, warmth from the people around her. And the boy with the injured hand, he was the one Karoline couldn't stop thinking about. She had seen the shame in his eyes that first night, the fear that he wasn't worth being cared for, the quiet resignation of a kid who had learned too early that the world didn't always stop to help the wounded. But now, he was back, not as a patient, but as a visitor. Karoline had returned to the hospital on a cloudy Sunday morning, unannounced. She wanted to see the changes for herself, not in reports or memos, but in faces and footsteps. She wore no badge this time, just a navy sweater, worn jeans, and a ponytail, and still, people noticed her. Not because she demanded attention, but because she had given people theirs. As she stepped into the main hallway, she paused to watch. Two nurses were laughing near the station. A janitor offered a bottle of water to a patient waiting in line. A doctor, one she didn't recognize, knelt beside an elderly woman in a wheelchair, asking how she was feeling. It was working. She was about to leave when a small voice stopped her. "Hey, Miss Leavitt?" She turned. It was him, the boy with the injured hand, dressed now in a clean hoodie and jeans. His hand fully healed, but his eyes still searching, like he wasn't sure if she'd remember. She knelt, smiling softly. "Hi." He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. A folded paper, crumpled at the edges, ink smudged slightly. "I wanted to say, thanks," he mumbled. Karoline took the paper gently. "Can I open it?" He nodded. Inside was a drawing, done in pencil and colored markers. A stick figure with brown hair, standing tall, arms outstretched in front of a hospital, and a caption written in careful block letters. "Some heroes don't wear capes. They wear courage." Her breath caught. "I didn't know who you were," he said. "That night, I just thought, maybe you were somebody." "You thought right," she whispered, voice cracking. And then the boy reached into his pocket again and pulled out something small, a candy bar. "It's my favorite," he said. "You should have it." Karoline's throat tightened. "Thank you." He smiled and walked off, turning once to wave, then disappeared around the corner. And just like that, she broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks, not from sorrow, but from something far rarer. Peace. Karoline stepped outside, the morning breeze brushing her face as she stood under the hospital's front arch. She looked up at the building, its brickwork still worn, the flag above it fluttering gently in the wind. This place was still imperfect, still struggling, but something had shifted. Justice hadn't come with sirens or lawsuits. It had come in whispers and glances, in people finding their voices again. She thought of Elias, the old janitor with his cap in hand. She thought of the veteran who now smiled during checkups. She thought of that little boy who no longer believed he was invisible. And she knew. This wasn't about headlines. It was about healing something deeper than cuts or fevers or infections. It was about restoring the soul of a place, and more importantly, the soul of the people within it. As she turned to walk away, a nurse opened the doors behind her and called out, "Miss Leavitt?" Karoline paused. "You left your coat," she said, holding it up. Karoline smiled gently. "No," she replied. "I think I left exactly what I came to leave." The doors closed, and Karoline walked on, back into the world, a little boy's drawing in her hand, and a hospital full of people, finally remembering what it meant to care. And if you've made it this far, have you ever felt mistreated when you needed help the most? Share your story in the comments. We read everyone, And if you believe dignity shouldn't depend on status or wealth, then subscribe now for more stories that fight for what's right. Because this isn't just a story, it's a reminder that one voice spoken with courage can change an entire system. And sometimes the most powerful justice is the quiet kind.